When I got back into comic book collecting about 20 years ago, I did it for reasons similar to the ones I had as a child of the 60s. I loved the Justice League, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, the Avengers, and other titles that I collected. But restarting was not what I thought it was going to be. I almost decided that it wasn't for me. But I worked my way through it. And today, I think I have a pretty good system. Stay tuned for the video.
Anachronic.
Hey comic guys and gals, I'm Joe and welcome to Anachronic Comics. Now this is part 2 of my series Smart Collecting Strategies. As I mentioned in my intro, I collected comics as a kid and I'm fortunate to have a few of them still around. As I got into collecting again, it was for reasons I had back then. I enjoyed the stories and some of the characters, and I simply held on to the comics that interested me. When I got back into collecting, with respect to the Justice League, I found that there were comic book shops and online sellers where I can get some of the comics I missed. At these sellers, I started buying new comics and old comics with no real idea of what or why I was buying. In time, I learned that people collect comic books differently than how we kids used to collect them back in the day. Fast forward to today, and I focus my collection in a few different categories. I collect and organize my collection according to my interests. If you're new to comic book collecting, just returning to collecting, or thinking of getting into collecting, these categories may help you decide what to collect and how to organize your collection. Now, before you decide to collect, make sure you watch part 1 of this series where I discuss the who, what, how, and where of beginning to collect comic books. So here are the categories that I buy, and I use those categories to organize my collection. Number 1, origin stories. Now, origin stories always interested me. How a superhero came to be was always a fun story for me. I have comics depicting origin stories for characters that interested me, but I've expanded this portion of my collection to include other characters' origin stories that provide me with another comic for this portion of my collection. The origin stories can be in an anthology or part of a comic book run. I recently posted a video on DC's Showcase Presents comic book from the Silver Age, where many superheroes of the Silver Age were introduced. The link is above and in the description. Number 2, first appearances of a character. Now, I generally don't make a distinction between cameos and first appearances. If there is a first appearance that interests me, I go for it. Sometimes the first appearance is also an origin story, so I can kill the proverbial 2 birds with 1 stone. Number 3, comic book series. Collecting a complete comic series doesn't have to be a daunting task, although some collectors take on the mantle of super collector by having and accomplishing the completion of a collection of all Amazing Spider-Man comics or other Silver Age comic books or heroes. Now you could put some limitations on such characters. For example, I'm close to completing Volume 1 of the Justice League of America. I had comics from my youth and have been steadily adding to it. But you can find a hero that interests you and do the same. I love Booster Gold, for example, and have recently completed collecting Volume 1, which incidentally includes his origin story and first appearance. So I've started on additional volumes now as well. That's not extremely difficult comics to find and not overly expensive, but it's a fun hunt. Number 4, special comic book events. This could be part of a comic series, but also include limited series and or crossover series and single issues. Some examples of older special comic book events I have in my personal collection include Crisis on Infinite Earths, Marvel's Civil War, and the more recent Doomsday Clock. These books are fun to collect, and I find a certain satisfaction in having the entire story in the original comic books. I also have some specialty comics and one-shots, such as the Spider-Man Superman crossover. It's an oversized magazine comic from 1976. I also have a copy of The Killing Joke. Number 5. Movie or TV series related comics. Collecting comics that relate to movies or TV shows is a way to further enjoy those shows, or, where they may have ended, continue the adventures of the character. Some that I have include prequels to Superman Returns and Star Trek movies. I also have Season 11 of Smallville, where I got to follow Clark in his first year as Superman after the show's 10th and final season. Number 6. Patriotic Covers. I love covers that promote patriotic themes. I have a number of those covers. Some are parodies, to be sure, but many are older comics involving war themes. Some are in the collection only because the hero's uniform or costume exemplifies the red, white, and blue. Number 7. Creator signed comics. These are comics signed by an artist or writer for the most part. I have one comic I bought that was signed by Stan Lee. I also have a number of comics I have that got signed at CGC signature events. I have a video where I show off some of those. The link is above and in the description. The ones that I treasure the most are the ones I had personally signed by Neil Adams at each of the last 3 New York Comic Cons. It was great talking to him about comics for a few minutes while he signed the books. He was always friendly and extremely personable. You could see that he still loves comics and loves discussing the comic book history. Number 8. Number ones. As I started looking for number 1 comics as kind of a lark, I turned it into a category of comics that I enjoy collecting. Of course, some number 1s overlap with other categories I've mentioned. I do have a video on my number 1 short box. Again, the link is above and in the description. I have more number 1s now, and I may do a video update soon. But if you watch the video, you can get an idea of the variety of collecting number 1s provides. Number 9. Trade paperbacks and graphic novels. My next comic book collection category is trade paperbacks and graphic novels. I've picked up trade paperbacks for old and new series that were well regarded or that I have read about but didn't collect. One recent example is a Justice League story called The Nail, which I had not heard about before reading an online article about the story. My graphic novels include such books as Superman Year One by Frank Miller and John Romita Jr., as well as some indie books. Number 10. Cover art. The final collecting category for me is cover art. With the advent of variant covers some years ago, comic book companies have begun to hire artists who are cover specialists. Some of these artists could clearly be portrait or landscape artists. The realism of their cover art is, in my mind, museum quality. You can collect just based on the cover itself if you like, or collect some of the specific new artists, such as Gabriel Delotto, Inyak Lee, or Riccardo Federici, 3 of my favorites. I also collect Silver Age Neil Adams covers. Now, as you can see from my list, collecting comics today provides a collector with lots of choices, perhaps limited only by your imagination and, of course, your pocketbook. Focusing on what you collect easily provides one method of organizing and storing your collection as well. But there certainly are other methods, and I would wager perhaps better ones than the ones I provide in this video. So the question of the day is, what is the focus of your collection, and how do you organize your comics? Do you base your collection and organization on categories like mine? Or perhaps do you do it by character, comic series, or comic book age, Golden Age, Silver Age? Let me know in the comments below. Now I'm working on 2 additional videos on collecting, which I will post soon. Hopefully, all 4 will combine to be a helpful reference tool. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, as always, I ask you please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. Be well, and I'll see you soon.